Morning, colleagues and councillors. Welcome to the Scrutiny Inquiry Panel grants, Thursday 23rd of October, 10:30, and I believe we've had a couple of apologies.
Yes, we've had apologies from councillors Di Jenkins and Alan Jeffrey.
Thanks very much. Any other apologies want to be given? No. Thank you. Disclosure of personal or prejudicial interests. Item 2, we don't have any. 3, prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. None. Minutes of the last meeting. Anybody that was there, if they can confirm the minutes. Thank you very much, Councillor White. And on to questions. I don't believe there are any.
No.
And item 6, the reason we're here, grant scrutiny inquiry full evidence pack. And I trust that my colleagues have read the evidence pack and have looked at the potential findings and recommendations. And I have been advised if we could look between pages 3 and 9, we will find the majority of what we've discussed and the salient points. So I'll hand it over to you, and any comments, suggestions, any observations? So I'll hand over to you. If you'd like to put your hand up, if you want to come in, that would also be very useful. And as you can see, it has been a rather extensive pack that we've been forwarded, and I think we've just about covered every angle that we could. So, oh, we've also got guests waiting to join in the lobby. No comments to make on the findings?
Only comment I make is that I think Michelle's done a wonderful job and it's very thorough.
I think there was 1 or 2 areas that I think we were going to delve into, and if I can find them. So if we look through some of the key findings, have you all got the paper on the key findings? Yes? Well, some of the key evidence suggests that the grants obviously come in many forms and fund a substantial part of services provided by the council, especially in areas like social services and education. And we did discuss exit strategies, ready to go for grants at the last minute application. This is happening and been evidenced by the panel speaking to the different departments. So it looks as if there has to be, in some respects, the grants are coming so late that there has to be some sort of backup plan for many of our departments who rely on grants. So I think, do we accept that as something that's been demonstrated through the evidence? No? Or yes? Okay. Point 2, from the evidence, it looks like some of the key areas for improvement include councillor awareness and involvement in grants. Do we agree with that? Public awareness raising, simplification of process, and reducing the bureaucracy where possible. Councillor Black, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, let me just get the thing up again. I think a general comment is that most of this process is out of our control, and that's a problem. As you've just said, sometimes you get last minute notification of grants, sometimes conditions on the grants are quite onerous. Sometimes you find yourself having to do things that you want. So I think the important recommendation from our perspective is that is in terms of planning an exit strategy. I think those are the most important issues here, that we need to be able to ensure that if we're going to apply for a grant, that we have clear objectives as to what we're going to do with that grant, that we have an exit strategy, we know what happens when that grant runs out, and we don't make ourselves over dependent on the grants. Some of the grants, such as example the pupil development grant, appears to be an ongoing thing. So in that sense, we don't really need that much of an exit strategy. But other grants come in maybe just 1 year or 2 or 3 years, and then we find that whatever we set up to do with those grants just disappear. And I suspect that would mostly apply around grants to do with tackling poverty and other things. So I think that what we have in front of us is very sensible and very much in line with that sort of thinking. The only question I had was in 9J. I'm not quite sure what that means. Unnecessary shifts from grants to contracts. Maybe that can be clarified.
So
Thanks
if you
very much.
recall that, so, Joe, do you want me to come in? If you recall, that was the I think especially from WCVS, wasn't it? Where if it's formed as a contract, the amount of legals and procedurals and notices, etc., like could be a dissuader for some of those small community groups. It's much easier and quicker to set up something, speaking in the vernacular, quick and dirty if it's given as a grant without conditions for a relatively small sum. So it's in that sense, and I'm mindful, for example, even as us as a council, when we did the first lot of defibrillators, that was a grant to us from a charity and onwards. It was structured as a grant, which makes it a lot easier than trying to do it through a contractual route. So I think it was in that context, and I acknowledged. I'm only giving you support here, but I acknowledge what the point that WCVS was making. That's what it was about, Councillor Black.
So when you get, so this is a situation where the council is given a grant and then pass it on to a third party to actually deliver that grant on our behalf.
Yes, and it's that where WCVS was certainly making, or SCVS was certainly making a plea for wherever possible to avoid it being contractual, because it just ties it up much more, especially with UK transparency notices. I mean, we'd only like to be of the scale that goes to that, but it's just that it can make it much more bureaucratic and dissuade some of the smallest community groups from applying in the first place.
Ooh.
Okay, I think the other issue is in terms of the smaller grants. I mean, we're not in control of these grants who are being offered to us, often made by Welsh government in pursuit of particular policy objectives. But I think we do need to be lobbying to either to mainstream them within the revenue support grant, or certainly to sort of roll them up into bigger grants, because I would guess the administration of charging them is very large, and that's a big problem and has been recognised. I think when I was an assembly member, we made those points many times to ministers.
And it continues to be the position of the WLGA, etc. So would entirely echo that, officer, and my understanding of where members are represented on WLGA, and they're lobbying for exactly the same, Councillor Black.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Black. And that was a very good session we had, wasn't it? Because the SCVS also brought to the table issues around the voucher scheme, and that they wouldn't necessarily go near it. So that was interesting, because it opened up other areas that certainly I'd never considered or thought about. Thanks for that. Councillor White, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think as well, in giving support to voluntary organisations that obviously we got in the city, went to help them in regard to the process of applying. So it makes it more sort of simple for them, but also there's a link there into the grant if they need additional support, so that they can just go back to an appropriate officer, plus give them guidance on the way how to fill the forms in, mainly, because I think that is an issue, Chair, where you only got to put the wrong answer down, and the grant is not allowed, and they've got to reapply all over again. So I think if we got some clear guidance as a council, there's a system in place where organisations, volunteer organisations and user groups that use our buildings and that, like community centres or other sort of friends or things like that, groups or whatever, they at least they will have a contact to make it far more easier for them to apply, and it's not so onerous on them, you know. Plus, they can look at the way that the grant application form is actually set out.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor White. If Councillor Black, do you want to come back in? It's black. It's a black and white show today.
It is, yes, yeah. We have this in Cumborough Landor as well. Can I just come back to 9B? I mean, I'm not conscious of ever seeing a report on some of these grants at all. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the transparency and the reporting back, I mean, obviously we have to do a report to Welsh Government, but all those reports presumably are available if you ask for them. But do they go anywhere else where councillors can oversee them, or is that just going to be too onerous at all? Maybe Ben can help with that.
Do you want to come in, Ben?
I think it's an interesting one. I think you're right, Councillor Black. I'm not aware of anything that requires sort of or results in anything reporting back. It could be too onerous. I wouldn't want to suggest to colleagues that they should sign up to that, but it's a valid point for the panel to express, because it is an interesting one. One route would be to go back to Welsh Government for submissions we've done, but it could be onerous, but it's not an unreasonable thing to ask about in terms of visibility. Lots of things, you know, many of the grants, as you've rightly said, some of them are sort of so baselines, they're all but there are others that are time bound, and often with projects, it's not unreasonable to expect some sort of post-completion review. The same could be post-completion of a grant, but it could be onerous. That would be for colleagues. They might curse me for saying that, but I think it's a valid point that Councillor Black raises, and it would be perfectly legitimate for you to flag it up in your findings for consideration. Certainly on starting maybe with some of the meatier ones that may have started and had got to an end. It doesn't have to be exclusively ones that have come to an end. It could just be, you know, what has been the value of a couple of the big ones in terms of what demonstrably it done for Swansea, as opposed to what has it done on a pan Wales basis. So I think it's fair game to put it in, but I share the express concern that it might be onerous, but perfectly valid for you to put that in as a reasonably concluded finding, I would have thought.
Okay, thanks.
I'd most probably say it's far too bureaucratic. Anyway, so some of the other things the panel, I presume, would be keen to see: more involvement and awareness of grants for councillors, more awareness and involvement of public grants, continued simplification of processes and bureaucracy. Interesting point. When it's in our power, representations made via LWGA and any other appropriate forum to remove areas like we've just discussed, simplification of practices and administration's burden, development of grants protocol, reduction in number of grant streams, and more indicative spending for longer periods, so we can plan better for the future. Grants fully integrated into TOMS and all financial planning, ensuring aspects like grant strategies, ongoing maintenance, etc., built in at the outset. So, any other comments? No? Are you happy with the work that's been completed or nearly completed? And everybody's had a say, and I think the only thing, I suppose, the last thing, but I can't open my computer screen up now, is just around. I did discuss it with Michelle yesterday, and just a comment on the voucher or the gift card scheme, wasn't it? We did say that we'd put something extra in the pack. Did we, Michelle?
Yep. I sent you a little, just a paragraph, really. It's just highlighting that you had a concern. It was one of the examples, really, of some of the areas of concern. So we can pop that in if you were happy with that. What I'll do is I'll pop a paragraph in the final report, which we put. So obviously, when we meet next on the 17th, in an informal meeting, you can really chew it over then, can't you, and make any amendments and add to it, etc.
Is this the voucher scheme which we had a briefing on yesterday for Christmas? We're talking about.
Not particularly just for Christmas. I think it's just voucher schemes or gift cards in general. And I think the SDVS did raise some issues around that and reasons why they wouldn't want to go near it. And I think we've. I mean,
we did it last Christmas, and we're doing it again this Christmas. So that is, and we had a briefing on it yesterday. For once, there's actually been an evaluation report which was circulated to us yesterday as well, which I think was which is good practice. I mean, my concern, I think, would be to raise this during the scrutiny of the poverty strategy, because my concern is it doesn't really has any sustainability attached to it. But I think that's something which needs to be raised during the poverty strategy debate as well.
Yes. Yeah, very good point. Linda.
Right, thank you. After that session that we had, I discussed it with the clerk of Pennard Community Council, who do have a scheme. It's not voucher, but it's a weekly scheme for helping people to buy food. And we checked it up with One Voice Wales, and one-off vouchers, or the scheme like we have, where they don't actually give them the money, they have to spend it at certain shops. They do not have to declare it as part of an income for any benefits that they're. Thank you.
Okay.
That they're applying for and getting, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's what I can't think of her name, but the lady from SVSC, that's what she was saying. She didn't want to get into that battlefield around.
No, but
because
we're just giving a one-off voucher, so that's not really an income, no.
Okay, thanks very much. Have we got anything else to say? Any other comments on the report? No. Oh, Paxton, do you want to come in?
Well, I'm normally very quiet on these things, Chairman, so my apologies for that. But anyway, my real concern, I think, at the start of this whole process, is looking at this grant inquiry, was the level of exposure that we have as a council to basically discretionary payments coming into the council, income coming into the council, which we got very little control over. What we haven't looked at in any respect in that sense, I suppose, is any way we can mitigate that. But when we listen to what education is saying, what social services is saying, they're very reliant on the grants that come outside the RSG. I'm not talking about the RSG now, but I'm talking about the other grants that we get, and the bulk of those come from Welsh Government. As you know, there's a by-election going on today up in the valleys. And basically that might give us an indication of what's likely to happen in the Senate elections next year. But there has to be the possibility that there will be a new administration in place next year, possibly an administration which has got very little experience in performing that role. And I'm not quite sure exactly what we can do, if anything, but I'd be interested to know what Ben thinks, what we can do to protect ourselves in those circumstances. Because at the end of the day, I suppose our grants outside the RSG is somewhere about 20% of the gross budget and about 40%, I think, of the net budget. Is the figures right, Ben?
Could you just repeat the last bit one that I was on about in terms of RSG, was it?
Sorry, but what I was saying, grants not excluding the RSG is about,
yes, no,
is it about 20% of the gross budget and 40% of net.
That's a good yardstick to base it on, and obviously I will tread carefully, given there are elections elsewhere today and other elections to come in due course. I think you're right, Councillor. There is a very limited amount of what we can do, and certainly in the background I am preparing for a whole raft of eventualities, as the current Welsh Government has equally said, because they have flagged that time-wise, if a budget could not pass, there would be only a percentage of even core RSG handed over, which is 75% at the start of the year if a budget wasn't passed, rising to 95% by July. So I am making arrangements behind the scenes as your Section 151 officer to prepare for all eventualities, albeit I don't want to labour the point at this point, given it could otherwise become unnecessary doom mongering. In sense, I'm not suggesting in any way that you were saying that. You're just flagging up quite rightly that first of all there is potentially that sticky period. That is one of the reasons why we held relatively high specific reserves and are in a relatively fortunate position for any temporary stopgap measures if we had to run between April and July. But you were right, if there were a new administration, even if the budget were passed without any great hitch, new administration or of whatever flavour, even if it's a similar one to the old one, whatever parameter works out, a new government forms and it will have different policy priorities and is entitled to seek to change the budget that's just been passed not that long ago. So those risks are there. I think it's right that you raise it and reflect upon, what happens in terms of permutations I'm not allowed to care about as an officer. But certainly I am preparing for all eventualities in terms of that short-term sticky period where there is a potential transition or a hold up and there could be significant cash flow issues. But we'll just have to watch and wait and see in terms of what direction of travel may be taken by whoever is in charge in due course. That's probably as much as I can say, and hopefully I've trodden an appropriately apolitical line on that. I know you weren't raising it in a political sense, Councillor. It was just making the obvious point that those risks are there and heightened compared to normal, given what is suggested could or could not come to pass.
Having listened to what you've said over the last few months, Ben, I have to say, I think that because of the way that you've worked the system and the skill that you use, we seem to be in a much better position in many ways in terms of where we are financially than a lot of the other councils in Wales. So I think we're very grateful to you for that. And we've sort of got a bit of a cushion there, but it's going to take a little bit of time, I think, once an administration is in place to work out where it's going to go and what we're going to be able to do after we've got over that period where we need that cushioning.
I think those words are exactly right. It's around cushioning. It provides for a degree of stability and self-destiny in that short-term period of potential fuzziness around cash-backed reserves. You only had my earmarked reserves report last cycle to council.
Yeah.
Equally today, Welsh Government has published the schools reserves for Wales. I knew exactly what was in it, and you will see we are the most cushioned of any authority in Wales if anyone wants to look at it. There are negative reserves in a number of authorities already. That helps protect schools to a degree. I added to HRA reserves for reasons that we discussed tangentially a number of times, particularly with Councillor Black in terms of council, and he recognises and understands why that is because of those ongoing wider issues. They do help, but I mustn't be smug. There are equally other things that could befall this council or other councils at any point in time, and whilst I remain happier and feeling more cushioned than many, there are undoubtedly increased risks and increased uncertainties, and some of them are quite big numbers. The corollary is the current proposal equally leaves me in a very odd planning position, because at the moment the proposed sort of kind of what's badged a standstill rollover budget plus a bit for inflation does at the moment seem to extend to all existing specific grants, which is a luxury we haven't normally had, have we? Because normally you sort of think, well, specific grants could be added to or go. But in terms of the public positioning, I read it as at the moment, those proposals, till it all sorts itself out, vis-a-vis is a budget passed in February, March, and what happens with a new administration come the election. It actually provides me with a slightly greater degree of certainty than any previous year when I've been waiting for it. So it's a perverse one in one sense. I'm taking that one as a mini win in the short term. But yes, I think you're right. I think we're better placed than many. and on some aspects very well placed, but I must not be smug. I could equally see 3 or 4 things coming down the line that may affect a handful of authorities, may only affect one authority, and then maybe I won't be quite so relaxed and gung-ho. It's part of the joy and burden of being your Section 151 officer.
Thank you, Ben. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry I raised this. I hope I think it was necessary to do it, and I think it should be reflected somewhere in our final report, obviously.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paxton. That's very interesting points. And thanks to Ben Smith's due diligence on everything financial. Thank you, Ben. Is there anything else to consider? Is there anything else the panel wish to consider at this point? No? Then I think we'll be meeting you again on the 17th of November. Is it 17th of November? 17th of November. Thanks everybody for attending,
Monday.
and thank you for those that contributed. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.